Welcome back, my spooky followers. I know it's been a long time. A lot of stuff has happened, a lot of craziness, and I haven't been able to make videos. And don't mind the mess behind me, because that's all a big part of it. So just focus here. Better yet, do something else and just listen if you're here for the spooky stories, because that's what I'm gonna do tonight. Is continue with our spooky story series. I know it's been forever, and I apologize. I'm going to try to really focus on getting more stories out. Not just stories, but also making more videos on just random stuff, because I have been slacking so much. Life has been so crazy. So again, tonight we're going to do another spooky story that I'm just going to read to you guys. If you like these, by all means, please, do a thumbs up, leave comments, especially if you have any other stories, or even if you have a story that you would like to send to me. I actually have an email now set up. I will put it in the link. It is done by me, which Spooky Pooky here. It'll go to the email that I have set up for my store. I'm gonna go ahead and just put that down there. I do check that, and I'll also in the description put in my link for my store. I'm still working on stuff for that. I still got lots of drawings to put up and designs that I've created. I just haven't gotten a chance to get them uploaded. Again, life has been crazy. A lot of it has been in learning more about myself and trying to deal with life and work and kids and home life. It has not been easy. But with that is just a little update on me. I hope to get my butt in gear and hopefully get on with these things. So with that being said, again, if you have a story that you would like to have me read, which I know I'm not the best, but I will give it my good old best try. You can send it to me, and I can read it on here and see how fun it can be. And just I'll make sure to put that email down at the bottom in the description so you guys can send stuff to me, whether it be spooky stories or some another story that a book or something, or even if you have information about cool things like mermaids or fairies or ghost stories, or you want to talk about how your crystals have flourished, or anything of that sort, anything to do with the creepy and spooky and everything around. So with further ado, we're going to continue reading the great supernatural stories, and this next one is called As It Was Written by Urlik. I could have sworn we did this one, but this one was the last one that we did. So I don't know why I had it marked. I bet you I know why. It was when I was doing up the editing. So that'd be my bad. So the next one that we will be reading is a little doozy. It's a little long, but why not? Why not a good story to come back on, right? So this next one is actually The Astrologer by Dick Donovan. My bad. Bad reading. Again, I don't own any rights to these stories. It's just something fun and exciting that, I thought we could do. And again, these are not my stories. But also, full warning, I love to read. I'm not the greatest out loud reader. I do mix up words, but I try and I have fun with it. So if you enjoy it, like, share, tell your friends, and yeah, let's get on with further ado. The Astrologer. The Black Forest is rich in story and tradition, of a weird and thrilling kind, but nothing can excel in ghastly horror that which is told of the sole heir of the once illustrious family of Viani. For generations, this family had held tyrannical sway over the district. Their power was tremendous. Their word was law. They ruled with a hand of iron. And then the peasants were their slaves. They were exceedingly wealthy. Their men were said to be brave, their women beautiful. But, as seems to be the fate of all powerful families, sooner or later, they began to decay. The famous habit of intermarrying produce the usual result, and the curse of insanity fell upon them. Many were the tragedies that this led to. And the time came at last when there was but one sole remaining male representative. This was a young, handsome, and well-proportioned, but of eccentric habits, and occasionally displaying those fatal signs which were only too well known. Nevertheless, it was beloved that Reginald de Viani, I think it's Viani, might escape the curse. The best medical advice was sought, and the opinion was that the chances were strongly in his favor, and he would escape. Reginald was brought up under the care of his mother, who had been left a widow for some years. She was highly austere, proud, and disdainful lady, who guarded her son with peculiar jealousy, for on him she knew depended the existence of her house. If he failed, then indeed the power of the de Vianis would be gone, and the family would crumble to decay. The lady and her son lived in a large castle, which for generations had been the Divani's stronghold, and had withstood the repelled many and determined attack. It was a gloomy pile, distinguished for its strength rather than its beauty, although internally much had been done for the comfort of the occupants. The castle was situated in Siberia, just on the borders of the forest. It stood on elevated ground, and anyone standing on the turrets command an immense panorama of great beauty. At some little distance rose the ruins of once powerful castle of Rudenstein. This had originally been the home of the De Vianis, but an evil genius seemed to enter into it, and for 2 or 3 generations such ill luck attended the family that they decided to desert an ancestral home. It was unroofed and left to wind and weather, and the evil things that haunt the great forest. One tower was left standing only as a sort of landmark. In the meantime, the new castle had risen, and here the family installed themselves. Here many of them paid the debt of nature, and here the last male representative was born. Here in lonely grandeur the widowed mother lived, surrounded by a ruin of servants and retainers, and having for companion her own sister, a much younger woman of great beauty and lively disposition. She was known as the Lady Hilda, and it was that she and her sister were by no means always in second. She protested against the gloomy surroundings in which she section of the noble house was being brought up, and she urged Madame de Vianney to keep more company, and relieve the castle, if possible, of the air of brooding melancholy which seemed to envelop it. But Madame had her own notions. She wanted to mold her son after her own fashion. She was afraid of exposing him to evil influences. She would not depart from the traditions of her race. One day, when Reginald was about 6 years of age, a traveler came to the castle and begged for hospitality. It had been a terrible day, wild, stormy, and wet. The traveler was a mysterious-looking man who seemed to have traveled far on foot, and was weary, wet, and hungry. He was a foreigner, and spoke but little German. He was invited into the servants' great hall, where food and drink were set before him, and as night approached, he was conducted to a chamber situated on the top of a tower. That night, a very violent storm, which had been threatening all day, burst over the country and did enormous damage. The thunder was terrific, the lightning incessant. The rain descended in a deluge. During the time that the storm was at its highest, a female servant, happening to glance from her window, which commanded a full view of the tower where the traveler was lodged, averred that she saw him walking about on the flat floor of the tower, and exposed to the full fury of the storm. She declared that he had more the appearance of a fiend than a man. That occasionally he broke into wild and rich laughter, and anon raised his hands aloft, as if daring the heavens and defying the lightning. Okay. Frightened almost into a fit, and yet fascinated, the woman watched him for some time, and at last saw him conversing with the arch-enemy of man himself. The following morning the servant hurried to her mistress and told her this silly story, the outcome of ignorance, superstition, and fear, and she insisted that the traveler who had been entertained and lodged in the castle was an evil being, who held converse with the devil, and that unless he were put to death, some terrible calamity would result from his visit. The lady, who was only a degree or two less superstitious than the Menel, was much impressed, for she lived in a district where superstition was very rife. People traveled very little in those days, and credence was given to the wildest and the most outrageous stories, while a belief in the power of the certain persons to hold communication with Satan was very common, especially in the Black Forest district. Indeed, even at that present day, when railways and telegraphs encircled the globe, natives of some of the remote districts in the forest still cling to this belief, and have all sorts of charms to protect themselves against the malignant influence of witches, warlocks, and forest demons. Madame de Vianney, having listened to the wild and weird story of the servant, summoned her major domo, and bade him bring the stranger to her. This was done, and when the stranger was ushered into her presence, he bowed low and reverently to the mistress of the castle, whoever regarded him with something like awe, for truly enough he was striking and remarkable man, and calculated to unfathomably impress anyone who was superstitious. He had a dark, swarthy face. His eyes were intensely black and piercing, his hair like jet. "Whence come you?" demanded the lady imperiously. "From Rashish, Persia," answered the man proudly, and drawing himself up as if by gesture he would resent the manner in which she addressed him. "And whither go you? To Russia? With what object? In search of knowledge." Madame was incensed by the proud air, and eyeing him suspiciously, said, "Unless I am mistaken, you are a man of evil nature, and in communication with the enemies of the human race." "No, madame," he answered, "unless the stars that shine so gloriously in the heavens above are enemies of the human race, for it is from the stars I divine my knowledge." This apparently mysterious answer appalled the lady, for she felt no doubt now that the man was a fiend, and she was about to summon her attendants and have him expelled, when her little son burst into the room, followed by his aunt. The child was laughing merely, and had come to show his mother some grotesque hands he had been drawing on a sheet of paper. But catching sight of the stranger, he was instantly silenced, and clung to his aunt's skirt, while the Lady Hilda regarded the man with intense interest. "Is that your son?" he asked. "No," answered Lady Hilda. "I am a single woman. He is the son of my sister, there, the Lady de Vianney." The man turned to Madame, and speaking in strange, far-away voice, as if inspired by some strange I'm not sure. Some sort of instinct. He said, "That boy is the hope and prop of your race. But have a have a care, for a curse is upon him. Take him from this gloomy dwelling. Show him the bright and the fair sense of the earth. Teach him charity and tolerance. Strengthen the body and broaden his mind, and watch the footsteps lest he stray. His life hangs by a thread only. Madame was horrified. She no longer doubted that this audacious stranger was an evil thing whose death would be a benefit to all men. As she caught her son up in her arms, she screamed, and when her attendants rushed in, she ordered them to beat the stranger and set the dogs upon him. Folding his arms, he stood like a rock. He gazed at her with scorn and defiance, but he was dragged from the apartment and roughly hurried down the great stairs to the courtyard, where a call was made to let the dogs loose. But at that instant the Lady Hilda approached upon the scene, and interposed to save the stranger from the fury and violence of the Menols. She I cannot say that word. I am so sorry. This word. I swear. See, I told you. I'm not good at reading sometimes. I just love doing it. Damn. Anyways, so she ordered them to release him, and when that was done, she bade him depart at once, saying, Your safety, your life, depends upon the speed with which you leave this castle behind you. You have spoken well and truly, and your advice is the advice of a wise man. But ignorance and tradition are powerful factors. They are difficult to counteract. They're difficult to counteract. The man bent his knee, and taking Lady Hilda's hand, kissed it gracefully, saying, I thank you, lady, and do not doubt that this generous act of yours will go unrewarded. But I pray you, let me have a word with you out of earshot of these human wolves, who spam panting to rent me to pieces. Unmindful of the angry looks darted at her and the menacing attitude of the Menols, she retired from a moment or two to a corner of the courtyard with the stranger, who, availing himself of the opportunity, said, Have you the courage to meet me alone in the forest in order that I may give you some information? Yes. Good. Meet me, then, tonight at the Tower of Ruins of Rudestein. As the moon rises, no harm shall befall you. Be good will come of it. She pledged herself to meet him. She then ordered the gates to be thrown open, and the man departed, followed by the jeers and taunts of the people. Lady Hilda turned fiercely upon the unbraided them for their cowardice in attacking a defenseless man. She was not a favorite with them, but she had power, and they were silenced. That night, the moon was rising. Lady Hilda slipped out of the castle by a secret door, and hesitantly made her way to the ruins of Rudestein, where the stranger was waiting for her. For 2 hours they talked together, and loving her nephew she anxiously inquired about his future. His hope lies in separating him from his mother, said the stranger. It may seem unnatural and cruel, but she is too strongly influenced in the traditions of her race to see that the boy's welfare depends on every means being taken to save him from the curse of the ancestors. "But how know you all this?" she answered, somewhat awed, and yet recognizing the soundness of his advice. "I read it in the stars," he answered mysteriously. "They are wondrous books in which the past and the future of the man can be read for those who have eyes to see." Many more questions were asked and answered, and Lady Hilda returned to the castle deeply impressed by the strange man's manner. Again and again she visited him, and his influence over her became all-powerful. Of course, these visits were secret ones, and she kept her own counsel. The stranger took up his abode in the tower, where there were no fear of his being disturbed. Wow, I made that way out to be harder than it was. With no fear of his being disturbed, for people had a dread of the ruins, and they say they were haunted. Lady Hilda procured him books and other things that he said he wanted, and she kept him supplied with food and money. During the time that this was taking place, she was urging her sister to quit the castle, retire to the capital. They're bringing up her son in the shadow of the court. But this the mother strenuously refused to do, while the ill feeling between her and her sister increased. At last, Lady Hilda disappeared, and with her nephew. She was ultimately traced to Cologne after some months absent, and she and the boy were brought back. Within a week of her return, she was found dead in her bed. She had been poisoned. The brutal of a deed, Dziemianowicz was invariable, an imposing sight. And there was no exception in Lady Hilda's case. None of the murmuring and pomp and ceremony were omitted, and for 3 days the body lay in state in the great entrance hall, and those who were entrusted with watching the corpse at night averred that one night, as the great bell of the castle was tolling the solemn midnight hours, peculiar dark-eyed man suddenly appeared. There was something so weird and strange in his appearance that they were dumbfounded with horror, and their horror was increased when they saw him lift the shrouded corpse from its coffin, press it to his breast, fondle it and kiss it, and lavish upon it all the manifestations of extreme love and affection. At last he replaced the body and disappeared as mysteriously as he came. This wonderful story soon spread from lip to lip, with additions and extravagations, and great was the consternation when, as the unhappy lady was being borne to the brutal vault of the Dziemianowicz in the neighboring church. The remarkable stranger was recognized amongst the crowd. He seemed bowed in sorrow, but when an attempt was made to seize him, he avoided it, and, as everyone declared, made himself invisible. Years passed away. Reginald Dziemianowicz grew into manhood. He had become a self-willed, passionate, gloomy man, who avoided his mother now, and an old and discreet woman, and made no secret of the fact that he disliked her. For a long time he had abandoned himself to the pleasure of the chase, and he tried to give some colour and tone to his gloomy and monotonous life by riotous living. One evening he had been out hunting, and having got separated from his followers, he was returning alone, when on reaching the ruins of Rudestein, his horse shield, and Reginald beheld a weird-looking old man standing amongst the ruins. His hair was white, and he had a long grey beard. "Who are you?" demanded Reginald, boldly, for he was courageous and daring to recklessness at times. "One who has watched you from childhood, and who would now speak into your ear words of wisdom. Make your horse fast to that tree, and follow me." Curiosity, no less, than some spell which he seemed incapable of resisting, prompted him to do the bidding of the stranger, who led the way up the mouldering stairs of the tower. On arriving at the top, he threw open the door and revealed an apartment, the floor of which was strewn with books written in strange characters. In the corner stood a large vase engraved with the signs of the zodiac, and encircled by mysterious letters. A huge telescope was placed in the center of the room, and pointed through a small aperture in the ceiling. As the old man entered, he looked up an ebony wand from a table near, and with it drew circles in the air. Then, turning to Reginald, said in a solemn and warning voice, "Man of ill-starred fortune, you were born under an unlucky planet, and your future is involved in darkness. But for the sake of her whom I loved, your aunt, the Lady Hilda, I would save you from your doom." Reginald laughed somewhat scornfully. Although he was not without superstition, he placed little faith in the wild stories which he had heard from his childhood, and he was in the habit of saying that there was little that was called supernatural that could not be explained by natural laws. "Ah, now I remember you," he exclaimed. "Years ago, when I was a child, you came into my mother's castle. You frightened me, then strangely impressed me." "And yet why should that have been?" asked the stranger. "I was simply a student of the occult, and was travelling the world in quest of knowledge. I had heard something of your family. I knew the curse that rested upon your house, and even then I would have tried to avert it. But your mother would have set her dogs upon me as she set her menels. To your aunt I owed my life, and my love for her grew. By my advice she took you away to the capital, but that act cost her her life. For her sake I would now save you. Since her death I have made long journeys into different countries, but have always been drawn back here by some influence I could not resist. My days my hours are numbered now, but before I join the sweet Lady Hilda, I would render you a service." Reginald was far from impressed, and laughed again, saying, "Ha! It was kind of you, but suppose I decline your good offer? Indeed, I am capable of taking care of myself and my fortunes, and frankly do not desire any service at the hands of a half-witted impostor, as I believe you to be. For myself, I have no belief either in God or devil, therefore am not likely to be frightened by anything you can tell me, or anything you can do. The old man's face assumed a look of sorrow and distress, and speaking in a voice that betrayed his emotion, he said, "Sad indeed it is that you should lack reverence. But have a care, and have a care. I warn you against infidelity, and against those sins which, if indulged in, will bring you to ruin. Listen, I say, and take heed. The star of your destiny already warms the heavens, and the fortunes of the proud family of Vianney must decline with it. When the stars shine tonight, look to the west. You will see your planet, distinguishable by its unusual brilliance. Look to it, I say, and let your thoughts wander from it to the God who rules the universe, and to him put up a prayer of repentance and a cry for light and guidance. But should you see a dull red meteor shoot across the face of your star of nativity, it will be a sign that a deed of blood will be done, and you will perpetrate it." For a moment or two, Reginald was really impressed by the awe-inspiring tone and manner of the old man. But once more he broke into a scornful laugh and said, "Ha! If this is all you have brought me here for, you do but waste my time, and I will depart." "Go," answered the old man. "You pronounce your doom, but let me exact a promise from you. On the night of the third day from now, return to this apartment, and if you find me dead, give my body Christian burial." "Yes, you shall have burial, as one of my dogs should," Reginald replied. "But since you are an unwelcome tenant in this ruined tower, which is part of my property, I shall give you instructions to have you driven away. However, as you confess to having liked my aunt, whom I loved better than I loved my mother, I will see that you do not want. You shall be furnished with means sufficiently ample to enable you to live where your inclinations prompt, only you must quit the tower. This is my living place, as it is to be my death place," exclaimed the old man. "And again I charge you, return here in 3 days. On fail, at your prevail." Reginald was exasperated. His temper arose now, and he thought the old man was defying him, and he strode hastily from the room, hurried down the stairs, and flinging himself on his horse, galloped to the castle, and with intention of giving orders to eject the strange old man from the tower at once. But by the time he reached the courtyard, he had changed his mind, and he could not help confessing to himself that some indefinable sense of fear restrained him. At any rate, he would let the old fellow remain where he was for a few days longer. 3 days had passed away, and the night came. Then Reginald remembered the man's request. At first he had no intention of returning to the ruins. As the evening wore on, however, he felt impelled by a feeling of overmastering curiosity to pay another visit to the wizard, if wizard he was. So without making known his intentions to anyone, He armed himself with a formidable spear used in boar hunting, and calling his faithful boarhound Wanga to his side, he set off for the tower. The night was beautifully fine. The air was still, the sky was cloudless, the stars shone with extraordinary brilliance. As Reginald pursued his way, he looked to the west and saw an unusually bright star, and knew, according to what the old man had told him, that it was the star of his nativity. He reached the ruin in about half an hour rapid walking. A weird silence seemed to pervade the place. No light was visible. There wasn't a sign of the old man's existence. Reginald told Wagner to precede him up the mouldering stairs. But then the great hound whined and drew back and crouched at its master's feet, and remained unmoved even by the vigorous kick which the master gave him. So, with a muttered oath, Reginald mounted the stairs alone. He pushed open the door and peered in. The window of the chamber was screened by a curtain. On a shelf burned a small lamp. At the table sat the old man. He was dressed in a suit of black velvet embroidered with gold, while round his waist was a massive belt of silver. He wore a skull cap on his head. In his thin white hand he grasped the ebony rod, while the index finger of the right hand was fixed on a passage in an open book. There laid the table before him. Reginald spoke to him. There was no answer, no movement. For the first time he felt a sense of fear. He spoke again, but still no answer came. He advanced a few steps into the room. "Do you not see I am here?" he exclaimed. The old man rose up, not as a living being, but like a mechanical figure. The face was the face of a corpse. The eyes were dull and glazed, but for an instant they lightened up as they turned upon the speaker, though the light faded immediately, and without a sound the old man sank to the floor, dead. The situation was so weird, so ghastly, so dramatic, that Reginald's fears were now fully aroused, and with a suppressed moan of horror he turned and fled. The dog was still crouching at the foot of the stairs, but rose with a cry of joy as his master appeared. As Reginald left the ruins, he glanced at the west. His star of nativity was burning brilliantly, but suddenly a dull red meteor shot across it, and remembering then the old man's prophecy, he was so overcome that he dropped senseless to the ground in a faint in a few minutes. Finding that something was wrong, the faithful hound rushed back to the castle, and by his howling and barking attracted attendants. When the servants hurried to the great gateway, he indicated that something was wrong, so torches were procured, and the dog was followed to where his master stood, lay insensible on the ground. He was raised up and carried back, but when he came to his senses, he was in a raging fever. He frequently became delirious, and in the hour of his lunacy was accustomed to talk of an evil spirit that had visited him in his slumbers. His mother was shocked at such evident symptoms of endangerment. She remembered her remembered the fate of her husband, and implored Reginald, as the last descendant of her great house, to recruit his health and raise his spirits by travel. Only with great difficulty was he introduced to quite the home of his infancy. The expostulations of his mother, however, at last prevailed, and he left the Castle di Veni for the sunny land of Italy. Months passed, and constant succession of novelty had produced so beneficial an effect that scarcely any trace remained of the mysterious malady which had so suddenly overtaken him. Occasionally, however, his mind was disturbed and gloomy, but a perpetual reassurance of amusement diverted the influence of past recollections, and rendered him at least as tranquil as it was in the power of his nature to permit. He continued for years abroad, during which time he wrote frequent to his mother, who still continued at the Castle di Viani, and the last announced his intentions of settling at Venice. He had remained but a few months in the city, when at the great period of the carnival he was introduced, as foreign nobleman, to the beautiful daughter of the Doge. She was able, accomplished, and endowed with every requisite to ensure permanent faculty. Reginald was charmed with her beauty and infatuated with the excelling qualities of her mind. After a time he confessed his attachment, and was informed with a blush that the affection was mutual. Nothing therefore remained but application to the Doge, who was instantly addressed on the subject, and implored to consummate the felicity of the young couple. The request was attended with success, and happiness of the lovers was complete. On the day fixed for the wedding, a brilliant assemblage of beauty thronged the ducal place of St. Mark's. All Venice crowded to the festival, and in the presence of the gayest noblemen of Italy, Reginald, Count di Viani, received the hand of Marcella, the invaded daughter of the Doge. In the evening, a masquerade festival was given at the palace, with the young couple anxious to be alone, escaped from the scene of revelry, and hurried in a gondola to the old palace, and had been prepared for their reception on the Grand Canal. It was a fine moonlight night. The stars were reflected in the silver bosom of an Adriatic. The sound of music and sweet voices singing, mellowed and softened by distance, were wafted to them on the gentle breeze. Venice seemed to glitter with tens of thousands of lamps, and the gondolas, as they passed and repassed, uttered their peculiar cries. The young couple felt supremely happy, and they directed their boatman to propel the boat leisurely along, that they might enjoy the interpreting beauty of the scene. For Venice, the sea-set jewel, had never looked more beautiful, and the languid air of the summer night begot a delicious sense of dreaminess, and a forgetfulness of the pain and misery of the world. As Reginald lay back with his head pillowed in the lap of his bride, he happened to turn his eye to the west, and there beheld his star of nativity, as brilliant as ever. Instantly his mind reverted to that awful night when the old wizard died, and he had remembered the dull red meteor and the weird prophecy. "I'll become so agitated that his wife was alarmed, and inquired the reason of it. He only laughed and said it was merely a passing memory that disturbed him, and soon her kiss and caresses restored him to serenity." Get something to drink real quick. Alright. The succeeding 6 months were uninterrupted by a single untoward incident. He passionately loved Marcella, and was beloved in return. His rough, uncouth nature had been smoothed down and refined by his wife and society in which he moved. He felt supremely happy, and though at times remembrance of the awful night in the ruins Rudestein disturbed him, he managed to shake off the influence and find a soothing balm in the caresses of his young bride. One day, however, there came to him an urgent message to repair to his birthplace without delay, as his mother lay at the point of death. Although he had never borne with her with any very strong affection, he felt it was his duty to obey the summons, and so, in company with his wife, he journeyed with all speed to the Black Forest. On reaching the castle, he found that his mother was already in the throes of death, and delirious. As soon as he entered her presence, she rose up in her bed, and without seeming to recognize him, and cursed him for being an unnatural and unfulfilled son. It was an awful sense, and affected Reginald in an appalling manner. Without recanting a word, or indeed noticing him in any way, she fell back on her pillow and expired. For some days Reginald was prostrated, and when his gentle and loving wife tried to soothe and comfort him, he repulsed her fiercely, until she was broken-hearted. But when he recovered his sense, he lavished a caress upon her, and gave every manifestation that he loved her devotedly. A few days later, however, he was wandering with Marcella through a very picturesque and beautiful part of the forest, when they seated themselves in a bank overlooking a stream. For some little time Reginald remained absorbed in thought, and then began to pick up handfuls of earth and scatter them in the water, and with a wild glare in his eye he mumbled, "This is a hateful world, all is dust and vanity. Nothing brings joy or contentment or peace. I am the last of my race. Why seek longer to support a rotten fabric? My kindred have squandered their substance and destroyed the vitality of the family. Let us follow my mother through the gates of death. Come, give me your hand, Marcella, and we will die together." His wife was horribly alarmed, and very endeavored to soothe him, Presently he grew calmer and rose and allowed her to lead him away. They continued to wander further afield at his request until night closed and the stars were burning. Brilliant above all the rest shone the fatal western planet, the star of Reginald's nativity. He gazed at it for some time with horror and pointed it out to the notice of Marcella. The hand of the heavens is in it, he mentally exclaimed, and the proud fortunes of Vianney hastened to a close. At this instant the ruined tower of Rudenstein appeared in sight, with the moon shining fully upon it. It is the place, resumed the maniac, where a deed of blood must be done, and I am fated to perpetrate it. But fear not, my poor girl, he added in a mild tone, while the tears sprang to his eyes. Your husband cannot harm you. He may be wretched, but he never shall be guilty. Although Marcella was dreadfully alarmed, she concealed her feelings as much as possible and induced him to hurry back. When he reached the castle he looked ghastly ill, and going to bed sank into a sort of coma. Night waned, morning dawned on the upland hills of the scenery, and with it came a renewal of Reginald's disorder. The day was stormy, and in unison with the troubled feelings of his mind he rose with the dawn, and without a word to anyone went off into the forest, nor did he return until the evening. Distressed beyond measure at his absence, she waited in dread suspense from his return, and sat at her casement gazing across the vast expanse of forest, which the westering sun was nor flooding nor a crimson light. Suddenly her door flew open, and Reginald made his appearance. His eyes were red and seemed to blaze with the light of madness, while his whole frame was convulsive as if he suffered from agonizing spasms of pain. It was not a dream, he exclaimed. I have seen her, and she has beckoned us to follow. Seen her? Seen who? Asked Marcella, alarmed at his frenzy. My mother, replied the maniac. Listen, while I tell you the strange story. I thought as I was wandering in the forest, a slimph of heaven approached, and revealed the countenance of my mother. I flew to join her, but was withheld by a wizard, who pointed to the western star. On a sudden loud shriek were heard, and the nymph assumed the guises of a demon. Her figure towered to an awful height, and she pointed in the scornful derision to you. Yes, to you, my wife. With a rage she drew you towards me. I seized. I murdered you, and strange cries and groans filled the air. I heard the voice of the fiendish astrologer shouting as from an charnel house, your destiny is accomplished, and the victim may retire with honor. Then I thought the fair front of heaven was obscured, and thick growths of clouded, clammy blood showered down in torrents from the blackened clouds of the west. The stars shot through the air, and the phantom of my mother again beckoned me to follow. The maniac ceased and rushed in agony from the apartment. Marcella followed, and discovered him leaning in a terrace in a trance against the wainscot of the library. With the gentlest motion she drew his hand in hers and led him into the open air. They rambled on, heedless of the gathering storm, until they discovered themselves at the base of the towers of Rudestein. Suddenly the maniac paused. A horrid thought seemed flashing across his brain, as with giant gasps he seized Marcella in his arms and bore her to the fatal apartment. In vain she shrieked for help, for pity. "Dear Reginald, it is Marcella who speaks. You cannot surely harm her." He heard, he heeded not, nor once said or stayed his steps till he reached the room of death. On a sudden his countenance lost its wildness and assumed a more fearful but composed look of determined madness. He advanced to the window, dragged away the rotten curtain, and gazed at the stormy face of heaven. Dark clouds flittered across the horizon, and thunder echoed in the distance to the west, and the fatal star was still visible, but shone widely, sickly leisured. At this instant a flash of lightning illuminated the whole apartment, and threw a broad, red glare upon a skeleton that mouldered upon the floor. Reginald observed it with affright, and remembered the unburdened astrologer. He advanced on Marcella, and pointing to the rising moon, a dark cloud sailing by, he shudderingly exclaimed, "But ere the full orb again shines forth, you shall die. I will accompany you in death, and hand in hand we will pass into the presence of our own people." The poor girl shrieked for pity, but her voice was lost in the angry ravings of the storm. The cloud in the meantime sailed on. It approached. The moon was darkened, and finally buried in the gloom. The maniac marked the hour and rushed with a fearful cry towards his victim. With murderous resolution he gasped her throat, while the helpless hand and half-strangled articulation implored his compassion. After one final struggle, the hollow death rattled and announced that life was extinct, and that the murderer held a corpse in his arms. An interval of reason now occurred, and on that partial restoration of his mind, Reginald discovered himself the unconscious murderer of Marcella's madness. The deepest madness again took possession of his faculties. He laughed, he shouted aloud with the unearthly yellings of a fiend, and in raging violence of his delirium he rushed out, climbed to the summit of the tower, and hurled himself headlong from it. In the morning the bodies of the young couple were discovered and buried in the same tomb. The fatal ruin of Rudestein still exists, but now commonly avoided as the residence of the spirits of the departed. Day by day it slowly crumbles to earth, and affords a shelter for the night raven or the wild things of the forest. Superstition has consecrated it to himself, and the tradition of the country has invested it with all the awful appendages of a charnel house. The wanderer who passes at nightfall shudders while he surveys its utter desolation, and exclaims as he travels on, "Surely this is a spot where guilty may thrive in safety." bigotry wave a spell to her enthrall her misguided votaries. And that there, my friends, was the story of the Astrologer. That was actually kind of lengthy, and I apologize. I was not expecting it to be that long. But with that being said, I have to say that was quite a story. And I have to say, it really does seem like a lot of these stories are written for, like, back in the day wording. Like, come on! Crazy. Of the writings. So again, that was The Astrologer. It was an interesting story. A kind of long story. But again, an interesting one. And if you stayed for this long, I appreciate it. I thank you, and I hope you enjoyed it, even though my reading skills are not the best. And if you did like it, by all means, please hit that like button. If you want to, please subscribe. I do plan on trying to get more videos out as I become, 1, more comfortable, and 2, try to hopefully get life on track. And now, again, thank you so much. And I do hope to see you guys again soon. And yeah, thank you for staying and enjoying this story with me. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.